Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavati Tamastu Mavit Vishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hariom. So we're coming to the end of the chapter. For some time we have been coming to the end of the chapter, but that's fine. When we have questions, it's good that we discuss. That's the way you digest the information. As it was said in the first verse, Krishna puts forward, I'll give you knowledge and wisdom. And to understand that nobody can ever give you wisdom, you can gain knowledge. But the system in the Upanishads and the Gita, and even if you look at the way Vedanta treatise has been devised in all of Swamiji's literature, it's kept the tradition of when you read something, though we are following jnanam, it also accounts for the karma side and the devotional side of us. So we can actually get on with our practice. So when Krishna puts forward, I will give you knowledge and wisdom, essentially it's for you to take that knowledge, be consistent, and through that consistency of purpose of reflecting over the knowledge, you draw out that wisdom. But you've got to be consistent in gaining that knowledge, and that will slowly percolate and digest within you. So it's an inbuilt reflection. The system offers that, but you've got to be consistent in your intake of knowledge. So in the first topic, that's what he's putting forward, that I'll give you knowledge and wisdom. And there's 2 points that rare is it that as a human being that we, rare is it that one strives for enlightenment, and rarer still is it that one who achieves it. But as human beings, we have the opportunity to do that. So it's, though it's rare, it's encouraging. In the first topic is encouraging us that we can actually do this because we've reached the stage of being human in our evolution. So we shouldn't give it up. We should understand this is what we've got to do. He continues on in the second topic, just giving an overall summary that there's 2, how Brahman manifests. And it puts forward Brahman's essentially in everything. So we need to dedicate all our activities to that universality, that Brahman, that self, if we want to get anywhere near it. In the third topic, he mentions the vicious do not know or seek Brahman. Perhaps because we get caught up with our gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. It actually masks the quality of truth. So what we've got to do is actually perhaps strive for that subtlest quality of sattva, get out of that tamas and rajas. We've got to put in that karma to get out of that. Otherwise we lose sight of the reality. The world catches us. So the individual who seeks the Brahman excels. And if you go in the opposite direction of the world, the deluded he's pointing out, you spiral down, you don't get that satisfaction. The deluded seek and gain finite fruits. So if you want the things of the world, you can have it. It will be backed by, it will be sanctioned by truth. But don't expect it to satiate you. He sort of puts forward. The wise one understands that's not going to do it for you. It's not going to allow you to move out of that agitation, that stress. So the wise one understands that and strives, pitches up on the higher values of life to get out. Is not caught up by yoga maya, the delusion, the illusion of the world. Understands that it's a play. So the topic that we're covering, the last topic, the wise seek and gain Brahman. There's an understanding, it's a play. So we don't get caught up. And we strive for that liberation in everything that we do. All of the things that we're doing are just a play, Leela. So there was a question here. Tim, if you could read the question.
And the question arises out of the verse we've begun. Question: are pairs of opposites a delusion? Are pairs of opposites a delusion?
Pairs of opposites, a delusion. Anyone? In verse 27, 28, what we were talking about. Anyone? Ash, go ahead.
Namaste. I'm thinking the world in itself is full of the pairs of opposites. That's how it exists with the opposites. So the more you are drawn into the world, the illusion of the world, there will be that delusion. The more you come closer to the self and out, are able to remove yourself from the world or understand that it's the illusion, you stay away from the opposites, pairs of opposites. You're in balance in the middle, so it's not a delusion. So the answers depends on how drawn into the world you are, as to how much of a how much you see those pairs of opposites.
Okay, good. Anyone else? Vidya.
So the pairs of opposites being what they are, joy, sorrow, happy, sad, are all very transient. They're very temporary and they are emotions of the mind. So when I'm happy, maybe my family is sad or my neighbors are sad. And it's a very relative thinking of one's own mind. So it's our own perceptions of what they are. We perceive them as what they are. And today I'm sad, but tomorrow I'm happy. So it's a very temporary feeling. And because of that transient nature of that emotion, it has to be a delusion. It has to be unreal. It can't be real, because anything that's real stands the test of time, as in it would be over a period of time. You would have the same emotions over a period of time. And to that end, what Ash said, that middle ground of samadukha sukha kshami, that standing neutral, far stands the test of time than the pairs of opposites.
Okay, good. Anyone want to add to Ash and Vidya? Ash, want to add?
Can I just, I think this is an example. So yesterday it was pouring with rain. Well, it must have been everywhere. And people at work were, oh, I can't believe this is our summer. It's so cold. And, you know, those were the sort of conversations. And only, what, a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, it was really hot. And it was, it's too hot. We're not geared up for this weather. You know, I can't sleep at night. It's way too hot. So we were going between the two sort of opposites of the weather and getting drawn into it. It's not a delusion. So the weather actually is happening. It's how we, as Vidya said, perceive, you know, whether we stay in the middle of it and think, okay, that it is what it is, and we enjoy both aspects of it. But yeah, that sort of came to me as it was the irony of how we were perceiving it last week and then this week.
Okay, good. Anybody else? Tim?
I wasn't going to answer this question because I set it, but I tossed a coin and it came out heads. So I'm going to answer the question. So opposites do give you a mechanism for moving through the world. But they are a delusion in the sense if you play a game, football, you know, success and failure are both imposters. One side succeeds and the other side fails. And it depends from your perspective. But from the perspective of the Sakshi, the referee, it doesn't exist success or failure. It's just a game.
Good. Anyone else want to add? So the more we get involved in the opposites, the more desires we create. And the more desires we create, the more we have to fulfill outwardly, so we don't get satiated. So we've got some agitation going on. And the more agitation and stress we are, the more we chase outwardly. So the opposites draw us in, as they all said. And the trick is to be the Sakshi. So you've got to have something out of the opposites, objectively stand out and see what you're doing in order to not be affected as the referee. It's not a game which is being played is not dependent on, it's dependent on the game of who loses or wins. To people, if it's a game of tennis, they may be dependent upon whether their careers may depend on whether they win or lose in their minds. And as long as that's so, there's a potential to lose. But if they're just playing the game, there's a bigger potential to gain whatever success they are to achieve, or learn from it and carry on to the next. There's that potential to move forward. I don't know if anybody remembers the tennis of last year, Djokovic and I forget the chap's name. Who was the other player playing Djokovic? The chap who talks always. Anybody remember his name? Anyway, the player who his opponent He's well known. The name slipped me. Often he often talks during matches and gets a little bit agitated. But Djokovic, though he was the winner of that tournament, of Wimbledon last year, he managed to have a good friendship with the opponent and actually bring him on board. And the opponent also was gracious too, though he was suffering different agitations. So the two had a mutual friendship. And at the end in the conversation, it was almost like it was described as a bromance. So though Djokovic, a senior player to him, won, and for the player, it was probably very hard to take in some sense, he managed to be quite warm, as though this was somebody who I look up to, and it's privileged to play this person. And Djokovic managed to bring him on board, that we're like brothers. No doubt we'll play again and maybe you'll win. So that grace with which you move through life needs a certain amount of objectivity. It's not dependent upon winning or losing. There's an objectivity, a grace. If you've got a higher value, you can afford to do that. You're not dependent on the opposites. If you lose, stiffer the game, the better the play. If you win, you have that grace. Put in my all, fine. So it becomes irrelevant. The opposites become irrelevant. You just move through them. That's really the winning streak. That's really where the pleasure is. So beyond opposites, everything where you get caught with the opposites is a delusion from an absolute point. Relatively speaking, we're in it. So we have to work through it as objectively as you can. "28.
Yesham tvantagatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandva moha nirmukta bhajante mam drida.
So we covered this verse a little last week, and we'd not done the commentary. So let's read the verse. Ash, if you could read the verse.
But those men of virtuous deeds, whose sins have come to an end, they, freed from the delusion of pairs of opposites, worship me with firm resolve.
So it's in actual fact what we've been discussing. So when your sins have come to the end in this context, it means your vasanas have come to the end. You resolve, there's a firm resolve of vasanas. There's no more agitation because there's no more desires, because no more vasanas. So free from the delusion. So worshipping with firm resolve. So your thoughts are only going towards truth, the self. Because you conquered the desires, they're not bothering you any longer. So the desires created because we don't know the truth of ourselves. So we rush in to the opposites. The desire gets created. Sometimes it gets fulfilled. So quick fix. Sometimes it doesn't. More often it doesn't. We get angry, a modification of desires, a ripple effect of more and more desires. But the virtuous person, that jnani, remember there was 4 types of virtuous people. three of them are following. They're getting their desire fixed by looking at something bigger, the self, but it's very much still desire orientated. So they're worshipping as a limited goal to get something out of it. So it's still desire ridden. So it's not a true seeker of truth. You worship something higher, a God, in a matter of it's ritualistic, because you want something, you want that peace of mind, you want that well, you got that curiosity, but that's not true spiritual evolution. You might start there, but once you realize it, you'll get off that. You won't get into that. So that person who's really resolving their desires has got to focus on something universal in their mind. They just want to get to the truth. So slowly, with that firm resolve, no vasanas, they're in a position. And before that position of meditation, they've been pursuing open eye meditation. Sakshibha was the constant, at the back of their mind, awareness of truth. They know all the activities they do, they're objective to it. So it's not without preparation, all of this. When you come to the last stages of meditation. So you can't just run a marathon before you do the walking, the training, everything. It's like this final stage. So when you've clean dropped all of your vasanas, desires, you've surpassed the pairs of opposites. You negate the world by asserting self. In all activities, whatever you're pursuing, you have at the back of your mind, it's only to get to the truth. So, Dvandva Moha, Vimukta, free from the delusion of opposites, with firm resolve, is saying. Punya karma, karmana, where sins have ended, the vasanas have ended. Bhajante, that person who worships me. So you're not following likes and dislikes. Just following what you've got to do. When there's no sin, there's no agitation, it just means free from the delusion. So one who's not caught up in the opposites is prepared for that meditation. Let's read the commentary.
When people's actions follow their egocentric desires and avoid their aversions, they become selfish and vicious. Such people acting egocentrically suffer from mental agitations, which the verse specifies as sins. Following their own personal likes and dislikes, they become enmeshed in the endless pairs of opposites in this world. They lose themselves in delusion, whereas those who act with a firm resolve to reach the Supreme Self do not fall a prey to desires and aversions. Acting thus with consistency of purpose, they drop their vasanas, desires, gradually. Their minds become calm, free from agitations, sins. Such actions are termed virtuous. The virtuous follow the right track until they reach the ultimate state of self-realization. They worship me with firm resolve, declares Krishna.
So here it says the virtuous follow the right track until they reach the ultimate state of realization. What's the right track?
the karma, bhakti and jnana yoga mark and doing your duties, dropping your desires or fulfilling your desires and not creating additional desires, doing the nitya karma and the naimitya karma. And whatever we've learned thus far in terms of our pursuit of higher, acting selflessly.
What else? Practically speaking, what do we have to think? Babita.
Yeah. Is it you just do what you ought to do without without the desire of a reward or fruit at the end of it?
Okay. Good. Good. Guru.
I think it refers to the actions which are not self-centric, which are not egocentric.
Mm-hmm.
I
Okay.
think that's what is right track.
Good. Mm-hmm. So, all of you are saying what's to be done. Practically in every day, what have you got to remember? What, say you're doing an activity. Say somebody comes and asks you to do something. What should your thoughts be? What could your thoughts be? And Jyoti?
To serve.
To serve, certainly. But in that service, how do you ascertain, should I or shouldn't I? That's right. You got to serve. Everybody's got to serve. He finds you. Why do you have to serve? Mm-hmm. Tim?
The phrase obligatory duty comes up in these conversations. So if you're asked to serve, you don't always say yes, because you have to balance that against what are one's obligatory duties.
And how will one know? In what way do you know? Are you obliged to do something or not? See, sometimes it becomes very complex. Not sometimes, every day it's complex. Should I do this? Should I do that? Somebody's asking me to do this. It appears like it's service, but I'm not sure it is. Oh, how do I make the measure? Within there.
Be affection. Be affection.
Okay, that's the product. Correct, but that's the product. So you can be a sakshi. So all of what you're saying is, these are right. But practically speaking, when you're being sakshi, how are you enabling yourself to be that? Babita.
Yeah, you need to use your intellect, actually contemplate certain things, immediately that, yes, you can do that and there won't be any bad consequences. But certain thing somebody asks you to do, can put you in dilemma of knowing doing the right thing or not. If somebody asks you to lie for them, for instance, is it the right thing to do or not? So you need to contemplate, you need to use your intellect as well.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just jump in and just do something thinking it's a seva. Not always.
Mm-hmm. So on what basis do we make the decision? So you use your intellect. So what's the measure? What should we be thinking?
You're serving something that is higher than yourself,
Mhm.
or for a higher purpose.
Mhm.
And when you do that, it's not self-centered. I think that word was already used, but it's not an act for the self, your own sort of desires and wants and those don't come into play when you're serving something beyond yourself.
Okay.
Or that mindset. So that's when you're sort of, I guess, tapping into the intellect more so. Otherwise you're staying at the mind level.
Okay. So I'm getting some good answers with lots of technicalities, but in your everyday life, you've got to use this. So we're building up the picture. Whenever you're asked to do something, or whenever you're about to do something, you have to check, does it hold good in line with my higher ideal? And
intent, the intention, what is the intention behind that?
So what is the intention? Yeah. So this is practical. So for what reason? What's the intention? So you've got to always make that distinction, that discrimination in line with your higher ideal. And sometimes things might appear in line with your higher ideal, but in actual fact, when you check it, you realize it's not. It might appear like a service. So you've got to check, are you running with your emotions or are you running with your intellect towards something higher? Sometimes your emotions can trick you. It happened to me the other day. I felt for some body needed something because they've always been loyal and good. I did the service, but afterwards I thought that's not in my remit. Should not have done it. Very tricky for it to be understood. When you cross that boat, you remember it, make a note of it. Don't get into it next time. So you've got to check know what your higher ideal is, what you're moving towards, what are your steps. So when you go off track, even when it appears like seva, you've got to check, is it or isn't it? Might be seva to one person, but is it in line with your higher ideal? Is it going to take you? Or is it taking you off your responsibilities? You've got to check it. Tim.
But isn't almost everything people ask you to do taking you off track? It's rare that someone asks you to do something that takes you on your path.
That's invariably true. That's why you have a guru. Because a guru will advise you in the best interest for what's on track for your spiritual evolution. If you trust in the guru that you have. It is true. Most people will ask you in relation to what they want, not in relation to what's good for you. So if a person's looking at spiritual evolution, what's put forward to you, maybe in terms of your evolution, you may not like doing what you have to do, but you know ultimately in the back of your mind it's for evolution of the self. So a guru or a trusted person who's on the spiritual path, you invariably can trust that. And the more you evolve, you'll find the right people if you're going to trust them. But generally, people are looking at their own interest. They want you to do something that could look like service. So that's why you have a mentor, a guru. Truly, they can't be looking in their interest. They've got to be looking in your interest. They don't need to look in their interest. They're free from wherever you're at. Hopefully. Jyoti.
Okay, so I have children and they ask me to do things and for them, and I do it on an emotional level. So are you saying that you should then defer from that and say no? They are capable of doing things themselves. They're older. How do you distinguish the serving and your duties?
So duties are not blind if they're in terms of spiritual evolution. People make duties which are blind in terms of their emotion and in terms of the society's mindset. So you've got to decide, each one, not you. It's a scenario which everybody will in some form have. So you've got to decide, are you emotionally catering to them because of your own wants and needs, or because it actually serves them to flourish? Sometimes we cater to people because of we want to be catered back to. It's only a selfish attachment, in fact. So is it actually needed that it will help their evolution? Then you cater to them. If not, once your kids have grown up past that dependency, they're their own people. Many people want to serve them because they want something out of the kids. It's quite self-interest. So you've got to check. At no stage do you not have emotions with your relationships, whether it be your kids, or whether it be your spouse, whether it be your people you deal with. But you don't make your decisions based on those emotions. You make your decisions based on what that discrimination of intellect is leading you to somewhere higher, more universal. And if people see that, then they will be inclined to follow that bigger picture too with you. But if they see one pandering to emotional values, they'll be inclined to follow that too, and now nobody's any of the better. Very difficult lesson to learn when within families, that emotional thing, because people play on it. Everybody plays on it. So should you not? What's your duty? If your duty is only to your family, maybe you do that. You've got to be careful. There's self-interest, catering for your own needs, or are you actually being of service to your family? It takes intellect. If you've got a bigger goal beyond your family, you'll be able to put it in better perspective. For the society, if you've got a bigger goal beyond your society, you can put it in a better perspective. If it's a universal goal, you become a better Sakshi, not dependent. Does that make sense, Jyoti? It's a tough one to swallow. There's a book called The Holocaust of Attachment. Any one of us might want to pick it up. Swamiji's compiled. In fact, just whilst mentioning Swamiji, the lecture Excellence of Enlightenment is actually recorded and it's online. Anybody want to watch it can still go through that link. Guru Purnima. Guru, you had something.
No, I think about to express the same thing. We understand, I think, every act, we will have to probably be able to assess whether it's in line with the higher ideal. But then if the yardstick that we're using itself, is that right or not? Is the decision being made through emotion or intellect? That seems to be a hard one.
So what should you do? What's the topic of the chapter we're studying?
Evolve from knowledge to wisdom.
Uh-huh. And so what's the first verse telling us? How do you evolve from knowledge to wisdom? What did we say in the beginning of the class? That's important. Which actually gives you the measure of your yardstick where you've got to up it. It's a key thing.
Instead, we talk about going beyond the dualities, not being egocentric. I'm just trying to figure out when we get into daily activities, most of our interactions seem to be very transactional on a day-to-day basis. So how would I be able to take that judgment on each and every decision that I make?
Okay, think about it. Think about it for a moment. Babita, you had something?
Yeah, I'm just going to say that do your action dedicated to the God. Do it like what you said, keeping harming in mind. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Vidya, you have something?
I mean, what Guru asked was so pertinent. It's very difficult. Every day doing something, consciously doing something is hard, but that's where our sadhana comes into practice. So our morning study, our conscious practice of, that discriminative mind, building our intellect. And initially we would struggle to apply, but then slowly but surely, when we continuously practice, then we start, developing that intellect over mind rather than mind over intellect. But there will still be some activities that we will do, and on hindsight realize I gave into my emotions rather than my intellect. But again, that's the manana, that is the reflection, and that should inform our next set of practices. So we shouldn't get trapped into, again, succumbing to our emotions, but doing what is right. So it's very, very hard, but there's no other way to master it unless we practice it consciously. It's what we learned in Bhajagovindam, Nitya, Anitya, Viveka, Vichara. We need to keep doing that constantly.
So we need to do Bhajagovinda.
That might be the next text we can do.
Okay, good. Tim, you had something?
Well, I was trying to formulate the answer that you wanted from your question, which is if we exhaust our vasanas, then we get to that position. But exhausting our vasanas is itself an immense challenge, which requires lots of decisions. But if we had no vasanas, then we would see no duality, and we would be able to answer Guru's question.
Okay. So in everyday practical life, to keep moving the bar, that's what we've got to keep doing. We keep having to we've got that dilemma. We have to make that choice. Should I do this? Should I do that? Is this considered of a bigger value or not? the way to do it is you've got to keep consistent knowledge of the self running through you. You've got to keep, I can give you knowledge and wisdom, but the wisdom comes from your own reflection. So you've got to keep a consistency of purpose in gaining the higher values. It's so subtle that what you've learned after you've left this class, you would have forgotten. Though we're talking very practically often, but it's gone. So we have to redo again and again and again to kind of get it into our minds. It becomes some point second nature. In that dilemma, we know what choice it is that we have to make. In the subtle choices, that it becomes more complex. So even if you make the wrong choice at a certain time, I think Tim, the girl mentioning, you still carry on. You just understood that, no, I no longer think of it this way. I have to step it up. But you can only be clear in your conscience of stepping up if you're actually putting in the effort to percolate the higher values of life consistently. Hence why we study regularly. Study isn't about taking in lots of knowledge. It's about the reflection of the situation, of your perceptions. What are you entertaining? How do you shift that focus? What is it that will allow me to broaden my circle of identification? What is it that allows me to keep focused and objective? So you might have it in your mind as knowledge, and then you come to do an activity and it all goes out of the window. So you've got to keep then checking. To the extent you've pitched up a higher ideal, you bring it back, your thoughts. Is this a higher ideal for me to serve this or not? Okay, I'm not sure, go with it. You'll find out if it is or it isn't. If you can think it through, then you don't have to go with it. You make the decision because it's the right thing you feel. There's many times where it's not the right thing. In fact, the decision that I'd made last week to do something, from everybody's point of view, would have been a higher ideal and of service. From my point of view, it was not in line with my ideal. But it took me a time to figure that out. So I shouldn't have done it. But it was a lesson. So what I'm trying to say is, as it gets more and more refined, others won't see it, but you know it in your heart of hearts. So you've got to trust your conscience. You've got to go with that conviction. You can only do that if you're consistent. You have that shraddha, have that consistency of purpose to what you need to do. It becomes subtler and subtler. Others won't be able to see what's going on in your head. Only you know what's going on. You've got to refine it. Keep on refining it. Don't allow the sin to come in, agitation. You make a mistake, forget it. Okay, go to the next. You make a mistake, oh, I did it again. Keep going. Back it with knowledge. Keep backing it with knowledge. This is how you see in your everyday activities, which may appear mundane, how to keep this self in play. It's just a lila play. It's just a play of the illusion. Yours is to do karma to get out. No matter how important something seems, it's just a play. So you've got to keep your focus on the end goal. So that takes training your mind. Your family, your children, your vocation, your job, whatever you do in life is just a play. So you've got to relate, is it your role in the play, but keep objective. And where we're not objective, we just got to do a bit more practice, not get bothered about it. Get out of it quickly, get on to the next. Fortify yourself in your morning study. I don't know, anybody watched the Guru Purnima? Okay. So what was the message that Swamiji gave at the end? Him, not the recording of what he'd said. What was the message? If you understand that, it's poignant. What was his message, anybody? Vidya?
Each one to pursue their own self. That should be their goal in life. Just go after the self.
Go after the self. So you've got no other business but in this world than to get to the self. So all our other businesses are not really, well, we've got to focus on. We've got to focus on them to the extent they take us to the truth. So the topics here in this Swamiji's kind of hired this chapter, two aspects of Brahman, how Brahman manifests itself. The vicious do not know it, nor seek Brahman. Four virtuous types of worshippers. The deluded seek and gain finite fruit. So you've got to understand, it's really poignant, the wise seek and gain Brahman. So the deluded are all those who are seeking the infinite pleasures of life. There's no harm in having pleasures of life. It's just don't be attached to them. Actually, if you've got a desire for it, get it over with, deal with it if it's very powerful, so you can move on. Do it so you can move on. It means some indulgence, indulge in it. So with the mindset to move on. No other way. Somebody thinks it's necessary, unnecessary, it's not their business. Your business is you. Got that desire, do it. And get out. If you can't eliminate it by knowledge, get in and get out. I hope that's helpful to everybody. This is happening all the time. So be very pragmatic and practical in your approach to this evolution, because it's about your everyday, why you're here, what your purpose is. It's not about some philosophy set somewhere else. It's about how you live. The knowledge of life and living. And that's helpful. So 29 and 30 have a completed reading. We have 29 and 30, which we will do next week. Hopefully we will finish. But it's good to ask questions because we need to be able to make this practical. Okay. Right.
Arji, thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.